will want to depart for Rome as soon as possible. On the Blue Line Ferry. We boarded the Blue Line Ferry, named after the successful train line through France, and found a place on its crowded stern to wave at the port as we departed. When I say we, I do not mean myself and Monsieur Fogg, of course. He had no interest in seeing our departure, nor in standing in front of the boat and watching our progress. Instead, he repaired to our cabin and immediately began to read the newspaper, leaving me in the company of a young woman named Estelle, who I had bumped into while hauling our case up the ramp. "You are an explorer?" she asked. "I try not to be." She nodded but seemed disappointed in my answer. "I want to be an explorer," she said. "Imagine the whole world stretching out beneath your feet. Who knows what secrets it holds? Give me some good food and a cognac, and I am happy." "But who knows what good food even is," she replies, "until you've tried it all." I found such enthusiasm rather giddying that, o'er the roll of the sea, made me stumble. We would be aboard for just one night. It was important to be comfortable. So we'll converse. "Hello, Estelle." "Hello again, monsieur. Tell me about Rome. I've heard terrible things about the Italian soldiers." "Tell me about Rome to Alexandria." "Here's something I do know. They say the Suez is the end of Europe, but in truth it is Alexandria. Tell me, the mysterious monsieur, are you enjoying the journey?" "Enormously. I would have thought it was tame for such as you." "Tell me about Dubrovnik." "And it's cheap?" "Tell me about Dubrovnik to Baghdad." Is via Izmir. "I've worked it out," she announced cheerfully. "Oh, I'm glad to hear it," I replied, feigning understanding. "Well, perhaps you will be," she said. "That depends on whether you would rather remain anonymous," and she winked. I was taken aback. Had we caused such a stir on our journey so far? It seemed unlikely. She pulled out a copy of the Times. "Here!" she cried, folding it and lifting it to my attention. To my astonishment, it was a headline about our journey. "Phileas Fogg attempts round-the-world adventure." I must have colored, as she pointed a finger. "I knew it was you!" Giddy with her discovery, she punched me on the arm. "What an exciting adventure!" "Travel is most thrilling," I agreed. "Especially now for me," she replied. "Fancy my meeting Phileas Fogg himself." I opened my mouth to dissuade her, but she interrupted. "You're more dashing than the story made out," she continued excitedly. "Wait until I tell my mother." "Mademoiselle, I am not Phileas Fogg." "Of course, I understand," she tapped the side of her nose, and then, triumphant, made to get up. "I'm sure you're in a hurry, so I won't keep you." "Perhaps a turn around the deck?" "I have nowhere to be," I told her with gleaming eyes she folded her hands and moved to sit beside me, saying nothing more, enjoying, I fear, the simple experience of being starstruck. "Your character is now shabby." And we're dying slowly. We arrived in Rome the next day, and I began to unload our case when the captain stopped me. "New regulations," he insisted, "ordered by the new Italian regime." "What regulations? You're traveling from England?" "Indeed so," the captain nodded. "Then you are required to sign this disclosure of artificer's materials." Eh Dieu! He produced a long roll of paper which I began to look over when young Mademoiselle Estelle appeared. "Monsieur Fogg!" she cried. I quickly introduced my master to her. What else could I do? Took an uncertain step back, glancing between them, my master's sharp, aquiline profile, my own rounded Gallic features. "You wish to meet Monsieur Fogg," I said, sympathetically. "Here he is." She thought for a moment more, then grinned. I understand. Very good." "Mademoiselle?" "A most Excellent disguise, monsieur, she replied. Very clever. Then she chuckled to herself, stretched up to peck me on the cheek, and hurried away in excitement. And I smiled. Youth, I declared. He nodded a touch. Very good, he remarked. This is great. Go to the market. Do I have anything that's good? Helsinki. God, that's fucking way out of the way. Sofia, Venice, and Budapest. And a hammer. In Karachi. We do need to get... We got some airship routes. But I should probably... Let's... Ooh, Jesus. Let's explore Rome for a bit and see if we can't find some more routes. There we go. We can take a blimp to Athens. I was tossing a coin into the waters of the Trevi Fountain when burst with their distinctive fast jog and began rounding everyone up. I tried to slip away before they reached me, an old instinct to avoid the attention of soldiery, whether guilty or innocent of any crime. Alas, there were too many of them to avoid. A lanky man with only the sparse beginnings of a mustache gestured at me with his rifle. No, in fact, his entire arm was a rifle, attached to his shoulder with iron bands, inlaid with elaborate signals. I looked up at his eyes. One of them was clear light blue, and the other covered with a leather eye patch mounted with a telescopic brass monocle. The other soldiers sported similar modifications to their bodies. They were half man, half automa. Como se chama? The blue-eyed soldier barked. Of course, I understood, but I pretended not to, hoping my status as a tourist would spare me trouble. It did not. At that moment, someone jostled me from behind, and I turned to see a figure in gray reaching into their pocket and then tossing out a grenade. I'm no fool. I ran for my life. That escalated. It is the Zouave, an equally fleet-footed woman declared. They hate the Scuola for what they have done to the young people. I understood immediately, looking back at the soldiers with their strange and terrible modifications. As I slowed to a walk and then made my way back to Monsieur Fogg, I could not help but see more signs of the Scuola's influence in Rome's cobblers strapped into gleaming exoskeletons, glass blowers with ceramic hands, porcelain-faced automata fetching water and stoking fires, and even soliciting passing trade alongside working girls in scandalously low-cut dresses. Perhaps Rome is the future. I confess I do not know. So it's basically Rome turned into Blade Runner. So I don't want this. Did we miss... Oh, that's... So the way to Athens in 2 days. We'll pay $5.40 to get it at noon. We'll take an airship out there. And then we'll sell the shirts and trousers for a hammer, which we can then sell in Athens. And we'll spend the day in Rome. I attended to Monsieur Fogg, providing him with clipped mustaches. We embark on Icarus. We boarded a commercial passenger airship in one of Rome's many docks. The stowing of luggage was handled by lines of figures with hooks and extendable poles fitted to their arms. I watched with an acrobat's interest as they flung cases to one another, swung in and out of the cargo hold, moving about like monkeys. They were cheerful types, full of raucous humor and efficient for for we were all within the cabin of the craft within a few hours, and the ship itself was tugging at the docking ropes after an hour or so more. Converse. What is your wish, Master? Talk about Athens. All anybody knows about Athens is its ancient history. What about Izmir? For instance, you can get to Istanbul from Izmir by public carriage, but it's slow going. What about Meteor Valley? Beautiful, certainly, but somewhat overrated. Well, it's going back on ourselves. We gotta keep going forward. Trip was long and somewhat slow. Was quite indifferent to it all. He peered through the window and nodded. Onwards and upwards, he declared. The airship crossed Italy, and we were approached by one of the cabin staff, a middle-aged lady whose serving tray was jointed to her left hip. Coffee, she asked, or would you prefer a pressé? Is there no wine? I asked, and the lady smiled. Of course, sir, she replied, and sashayed away down the aisle, returning a moment later with a deep glass of Merlot. I thanked her and toasted the benefits of first-class travel. The Aegean below sparkled like a diamond-covered cloth. Even from the great height, we could see the ferry boats plying their trade back and forth across the water. Will airships remove the need for sea travel? I mused to the man next to me, a short Greek fellow with thick spectacles who tutted with concern. I hope not, he answered, since boats are my livelihood. Putting out his hand, he introduced himself as Dimitri Solfos, owner of a shipping freight company that ran goods between Greece and North Africa. I inquired into departures, and he was happy to provide me with a pamphlet outlining the routes and timings. The one of most interest was sailing to Cairo, which was leaving tomorrow. I took it to my master directly, and he nodded with deep satisfaction. Yes, that would certainly be a possibility, he declared, and then reclined back, happy to sleep, until we docked. So we need to get to Cairo. So we are going to want to sell the hammer. We can get this guy. I don't know where Hyle is. And what about this guy to Alexandria? Arrives tomorrow at 8 a.m. So that is perfectly fine. That is perfectly fine. We will wait in the hotel. My master was not, as a rule, particularly interested in the fabulous locales and exotic cities we journeyed through. Athens was the exception that proved the rule. His sudden interest was not limited to the city. He fixed me with a look. Do you speak Greek? I had spent a glorious summer with a Greek contortionist who could do the most elegant arabesque penché. Mais oui, monsieur, I smiled sharply, repeating a few of the phrases taught to me by my paramour. Monsieur Fogg blushed vermilion. That, Passepartout, he cleared his throat, is a very specialized vocabulary. Despite my master's grasp of ancient Greek, the demotic variant more commonly spoken on the streets eluded him. We were reduced to asking for directions through a combination of mime. Moi, opposite, quotations from Homer, my master, and half-remembered flattery, moi encore. We picked our way through the labyrinthian streets of the Plaka and up to the Acropolis. I gazed at the Parthenon's columns. It was a magnificent sight, even in ruins. I could only imagine how it must have looked 2,000 years ago. the jewel in the crown of the Athenian Empire. It is exquisite, I breathed in, interrupting Mr. Fogg's silent reverie without quite meaning to. Alas, our quiet, companionable moment did not return. Oh no. So let's get ready to go to Cairo. The Sophos Company Ferry. We found our way to Sophos Ferry terminal in good time and waved greeting to the owner, who was visiting to inspect his fleet. Passepartout, we cried cheerfully. You will join me and drink some ritsina? Monsieur Fogg lifted an eyebrow but said nothing. I would, I replied, but I cannot. We must continue our journey. Sophos nodded. Of course, I will not delay you. We clambered aboard Sophos' ferry, finding some space between barrels of olives and large packing crates that smelled of fish. Soon the rope slipped from its ring and we were away. Greetings, Madame Nicolai. Passepartout, welcome aboard. Tell me more about Cairo. Tell me about Cairo to Suez. Private car, okay. Suez to Lahore. It says it's a long one, but it's pretty straightforward. Next stop, Cairo, on the coast of Africa. The journey was mercifully brief, perhaps because the crew were so feckless. Only at that last moment did they start to move, swarming the rigging in mass, bringing us slowly into the bustling port of Alexandria. As we came ashore, I gasped at the sight of the towering lighthouse that blazed a beacon of incredible golden light across the water. I had understood the lighthouse to be long since destroyed, but I shrugged. No doubt I had misunderstood. The sailors gestured for us to follow. From the port, it was a short carriage ride to Cairo, and we arrived in good time. And then we'll spend the night. Cairo is attempting to modernize following the Parisian model. The result is a mismatch of tree-lined streets and maze-like souks. Of course, the people do not care and most certainly do not dress like Parisians. I was browsing the souk when I felt a hand dipped into my pocket. I turned around fast, but the little girl whose hand was in my pocket was clearly well practiced and slid between my knees to run away. I was 30 pounds poorer, I thought. My funds go down a little bit, so we'll wait a little bit. We will plan that departure. But we're going to want to come back to Cairo, wait for it to open, go to the market and sell this can of engine oil. Remove this. Jeddah, Dubai, and Bombay. We're going to want this. Alright, so we are going to want to depart to Suez in our car, and it takes a little bit. We found a private driver to take us to Suez. The journey was quick enough. The roads here in Egypt are surprisingly well maintained and the car itself ran efficiently. I asked the driver how she kept it so well, and she smiled with pleasure at the compliment. There are many artificers here in Egypt, she replied. There always have been, of course. The guild was founded on the banks of the Nile. I believe the guild was founded in France, I told her with Gallic pride. She took her eyes from the road a moment to look at me, then she shook her head and returned her attention to some extremely nimble driving. I've seen what it's like to drive in Cairo. It is not... Oh. Oh, and we can sell the medallion. I wish there was a pause. But time is of the essence. I don't actually know where Karachi is off the top of my head. So let's see. of this. Caribbean time too? Do we want to go through the Caribbean? We'll go through the Caribbean. And then we need to plan our... Oh, there we go. From Houston to Havana, and then Havana to Miami, and Port Royal, and then New Orleans goes to Port-au-Prince. Caracas goes to Port-au-Prince as well. Alright, we need to plan our departure for Bombay. There we go, and we will depart now. And now we're going through the Suez. We can go to America. The dock was crowded with people cheering one and another along. We, of course, boarded in silence. No one paid us any attention, or perhaps not. I sensed a pair of eyes fixed on us as we made our way aboard the Mongolia. Perhaps the sight of a true English gentleman is a wonderful rarity in these parts, who can say? So we'll keep Monsieur Fogg groomed. The steamer Mongolia was built of iron of 2,800 tons burden and 500 horsepower. She sailed us as grandly as Duchess out of the port of Suez. Can we truly be departing Africa already? I asked as the buildings retreated into the distance. I should hope so, remarked my master, for we have quite a distance yet to travel. My master, I was learning, was as unvarying as the ship's chronometers. I confess I found it comforting to serve such a reliable personage. Certainly he was incurious and perhaps even indifferent, but he was also dauntless. Without doubt, he was an eccentric gentleman upon an even more eccentric quest, but he was my eccentric gentleman. That was a position I intended to keep, despite the hazards. Reverse. Pericleos. Tell me more about Bombay. Bombay to Rangoon. Ujiji? English poetry. Tell me more about Rangoon. To Singapore? Colombo? Nour. Stone Town? Ugh. Oh, good. Oh, we gotta get to Bangalore, I think. Do I have a Bangalore thing? Seems Francis were traveling the full distance to Bombay. Good town, he declared. Good artificers, too. On the evening of the second day, we approached the city of Jeddah on the east coast of the Gulf. What kind of place is it? I asked, a sailor pointing over the rail. He shrugged. I've never been. The boats sail past, but pleasant enough, I supposed. I was taken by the sudden thought that perhaps we could put ashore here, but I shook my head to clear the daydream. The Mongolia, would take us far, fast. Indecisiveness was not what Mr. Fogg would want. I befriended an extravagantly whiskered fellow passenger who introduced himself as Monsieur Phi and evinced a flattering interest in my travels. You were making a tour of the world in 80 days, he exclaimed, eyes wide as saucers. It is a wager, I confirmed mournfully. Gentlemen are strange creatures and given to stranger fancies to fill their time. Monsieur Phi looked suddenly rather shrewd. Must be an expensive business. My master is a gentleman, he said repressively, for I considered it gauche to discuss financial matters. Yes, of course, my companion agreed laughingly, though his mustache twitched like a pendulum. All the same, what a singular endeavor. So we'll take care of him. I thought I took care of him. There we go. We gotta keep his health up, otherwise he just explodes, I guess. Was a most congenial fellow and possessed of all manner of useful knowledge. I asked him what he knew of Bombay, the final destination. I was stationed in Bangalore during my time in India, not Bombay, he told me, smiling. I spent much of my time playing cricket. We colonials take the game seriously, almost as seriously as the natives themselves. See if we can talk to somebody about Bombay. To Nova Goa. And then Nova Goa to Bangalore. Aden. English poetry. Pitcairn Island. Bring it back to Nova Goa. Panama City. I think some of these are just... Ooh, Jesus. Calcutta. And then Auckland goes to... probably Pitcairn Island. And then Pitcairn Island goes all the way to... what I assume is somewhere in Peru. Mr. Fee dragged me up on the deck slowly. You will not want to miss this, my friend. Through the sea mist I saw the immaculate city of Aden, nestled in the caldera of a volcano, bounded by sheer black cliffs and crystal blue sea. My God, I blasphemed, secure in the knowledge that any passing deity would forgive me, given the magnificent sight before my eyes. Perhaps your master would want to see it also, Fix asked. I could send one of the deckhands to fetch him. My master is rarely fetched, I replied a little archly. Indeed not, remarked a voice from behind us, and I turned to see my master emerging from below decks. I made to introduce the two, but neither seemed interested. Monsieur Fee drifting away along the rail, and my master tapping his fingers on the rail with pleasure. Shipping lanes outside of Aden were busy. We passed close enough to other steamliners to make out individual passengers taking a turn above deck. A little boy leaned over the railing and waved at me, and I gave him a calm nod, not wishing to make a spectacle of myself in front of my master. The child looked somewhat chagrined, but Monsieur Fogg gave me a small approving dip of the head, and I was content. I turned my face to the warm wind and enjoyed the sense of movement. Now we were truly on our way. Ooh. Ooh. At breakfast I saw a young bronze-skinned lady in a lilac dress scribbling in a notebook, her eggs and smoked mackerel untouched upon her plate. Every now and then she would pause and gaze into the middle distant present, a pen pressed against her lips. I decided to introduce myself. With every gentlemanly courtesy, Her eyebrows raised in challenge. I have no interest or talent with polite conversation, if that is your intent. Certainly you possess ample wit, I remarked, rather stung, so it is merely politeness which you lack. To my utter astonishment, she tilted her head back and laughed throatily. How unexpected, a man who actually speaks the truth in the presence of a lady. I was only further entangled a moment later when the lady's father arrived, when Monsieur Williamson. Eleanor, he said reprovingly, who is this man? My name is Nour, she said formally, and this man is a rare creature, indeed, a fellow with a brain, not that you would recognize it, father. With that she swept away, leaving me to explain myself to her beleaguered parents. Your character is now zestful. I like how I'm collecting adjectives. I happened upon Demoiselle Williamson in the piano room, where she was studiously ignoring the music and merriment in favor of her notebook. I tried to glimpse the contents stealthily. Adriana threw herself upon the ancient sarcophagus. I will not let you plunder this tomb, she cried, her voice crackling with defiance. Lord Havering raked his coal-black eyes across her body. Oh, he drawled, raising the point of his rapier. And how do you propose to stop me? Her lips curved into a triumphant smile as Demoiselle Williamson gave a sudden cry of alarm and slapped me roundly upon the cheek. I've spent too long engrossed in her text. You weasel! Every eye in the piano room turned upon me in silent accusation, and I gave an extravagant shrug, earning the forgiveness of, I would estimate, exactly half the room. Your character is now dependable once again. We're going to make sure our gentleman is well taken care of. Mr. Williamson offered me a pipeful of tobacco in the evening. I am perplexed by my daughter, he admitted miserably. What is so perplexing? I asked gently. She does not behave in the manner of a lady at all, he groaned. She told me last night that she has been writing penny dreadfuls for this past year. She is... His gentlemanly voice dropped with horror, so the last word was a mere croak. Published. The fragment of text I had glimpsed in her notebook flashed rather awkwardly through my mind. Let's see. I'm not, You fear a scandal? Scandal has already been. She has broken her engagement because she has independent means. Oh my god. Must all ladies marry? I shrugged. Many gently bred ladies who join the Artificers Guild do not. She is not taking up artificer's robes, but his imagine failed, and he spat. A pen! I sighed and considered my next words. At least she's told you the truth. After only a year of lies, Monsieur Williamson corrected bitterly. He took his leave soon after, and as I retired to bed, I saw him still pacing the deck, eyes downcast. Oh. A slim volume had been slid under my door in the night, bound with a ribbon and a short note. Apparently my father has already spilled my secret, so I shall not deny it. I am a published woman, and here is my latest 2-volume as proof. Miss Nour Williamson. I picked up the cheaply bound book titled Adriana and the Lost Sarcophagus of Thebes and opened it at the first page. Adriana Heraoui was no ordinary lady. While other girls of her age and background took up watercolors and practiced their scales upon the piano and dreamed of matrimony, Adriana dreamed of sun-bleached cities and featureless deserts of yellow sand. I settled in to read Miss Williamson's novella until my master woke and required my services. Well, demanded Demoiselle Williamson at lunch, what did you think of my story? Adriana is a charming creation. I only wish my father thought so, she sighed. He read my volume last night and believes Adriana is merely a cipher for my own passions and being. Imagine that. He does not understand art clearly. The demoiselle tossed her head. Worse, he believes Lord Havering to be Adriana's lover and now suspects that I am concealing my own paramour from him. She glared into the middle distance. Lord Havering is the villain. He is Adriana's nemesis. He is utterly misreading the text. Perhaps your father is romantic. My father a romantic? She looked utterly scandalized. He simply cannot follow plots. Havering thwarts Adriana constantly and condescends to her at every turn. He even threatens her with a rapier. This is hardly romantic. Demoiselle Williamson dug into her venison savagely, muttering of interfering fathers and irresponsible readers. Wisely, I smiled in a most amicable, friendly fashion. There was clearly nothing that could be done for this unfortunate father-daughter pair, other than to perhaps lock them into a room together and force them to talk. Greetings, Demoiselle. Tell me more about Calcutta. Tell me about Chittagong. Excellent. What about Chittagong to Manila? What about English poetry? Tell me more about Chittagong. I think there's something happening with the text here. Unless this is them interrupting me. There we go. Bang. And that'll take us to Hong Kong. Maybe we go through China. I am no tourist, Sir Francis declared with cheerful glee towards my master as they dealt another hand. I am taking the train to Calcutta on important business. How long does this train take? I inquired, or was about to, as just then Mr. Williamson stormed in, threw a glove at me, and bellowed a challenge. Excuse me? I asked the bewilderment. You mean to challenge me? You, said Mr. Williamson, voice dripping with venom, are Lord Havering, and you have led my daughter astray. Okay. I'm not Lord Havering, I insisted, though I perceived, unlike the rest of the recreation room, that Mr. Williamson was referring to the character in Adriana and the lost sarcophagus of thieves. The man scowled. Besides which, Lord Havering is clearly a villain and not a romantic hero. Aha! He picked up his glove and then tossed it once more. You have read her text, you blackguard. And yet the way we spoke together, you acted quite the charming innocent. He drew his arm back and made a fist, and then I realized he was almost certainly about to punch me in the face. I threw myself to the floor, not wishing to engage in fisticuffs like a dockside brawler. Equally, I had a powerful urge to protect my delicate cherished fish from his Brutus fish. He tripped over me, and we tangled together upon the carpeted floor. What in the name of Ra and Osiris is going on? Miss Williamson shouted, arriving at the precise unfortunate moment. She seized her father by the armpits and dragged him away, muttering various unladylike curses as I called vague apologies. Monsieur Fogg regarded me with a remarkable aplomb given the scene which had preceded. You would tell me, would you not, if you had outraged any ladies of late, Passepartout? I nodded neatly, trying, if possible, to regather my composure. Aw, he doesn't like it when I cause scenes. Boom. I kept my cabin on the last day of our journey to avoid any repetition of the previous evening's debacle, but I could not avoid Miss Williamson as she disembarked at Bombay. She clutched her hands to her bosom theatrically as she spotted me. Goodbye, my dear Lord Havering, she called, counterfeiting a sickly love-struck smile. I will never forget you. Nor are you, my Adriana, I called back with a rakish smile as her father turned a bright, horrible shade of red beside her. And then we disembarked into the humid, salt, and smoke-laced air of Bombay. We had arrived in India,